Be wet sanding our plug. Again, with M600, you need to have a sprayer. This is the spray bottle I use, and it has a special seal that doesn't wear out from time to time. You can get one of these from Consolidated. The number is, I wish I could read it, 215-425-3900, 216-425-3900. I don't have my glasses on while I'm looking through the lens. Anyway, by using this bottle as a sprayer and a dispenser, you save many times. The bottles are $3 or $4, but they have a special seal that's made to work with degreasing agents. Good investment. You'll use it over and over again. And this one is about, you can tell how many years I've used this, about 10 years already. Just a couple of tips that really make sense. First thing, when you use an M600, you got to keep the whole area wet. It's got to soak. The reason is you're using the degreasing agent as a medium for flushing away the residue. So what happens in essence if you dry sand, let me just make a little demonstration. If you dry sand, here's what happens. Yeah, you'll get it. If you had 100 sheets of paper, you'll get it to be smooth, but the paper clogs right up. Now by taking the same piece of paper, you're in essence rinsing away. This is the reason it works so well. And you can see I can feather that edge in a matter of no time. But now, even now, that's clogged up. So the idea is to constantly be flushing it away like a flushing agent. Now, even if you did the whole thing by hand, you'd get, you know, good, maybe a little bit even better than mediocre results. But you can see it constantly needs to be flushed away. If you use water, the trouble is if it gets into the wood, again, I've said that, you're dead. The wood swells up, day's over. If you break through in any spot or an edge or some leaks underneath or something. Now, we've got a perfect sand up there. In the end, you want to have some clean towels around and just wipe it off. And what you're looking for, most of all, is a feather edge. This is extremely helpful when you want to do a big flat area. Again, you can do it without these tools, but it just makes it so much more difficult. A big area like this, and you got to keep the sandpaper wet. It goes very quickly. It goes quickly relative to how, see, I've already gotten down near the wood, so woohoo, don't want to be too aggressive here. And I could do the last little bit with 600 even if I want to. Now, if we had any reverse curves or shapes, you could figure which one of those little pollywogs or tadpoles we'd want to use. But by constantly going back and forth, as soon as we see we're coming up to wood, hey, we're pretty much done. We got to stop and get another coat of primer on there. But you can see along here there's an edge that this'll take that edge right out. And what you'll in essence see is the bad spot coming up. It'll show up as a, here it is, showing up as a high spot. A lot of times your eye doesn't catch that, even if this is in the final model. The trick is, though, if you were doing a model instead of a plug, you'd want to leave as little material on as possible. In this case, we don't care what the plug weighs. We could put 100 coats of primer. Now, that's perfect. There's no way you can feel that. Well, I'll get the whole plug done and we'll be ready to shoot another coat of primer. Actually, we're going to shoot another coat of primer before we have our Christmas Eve dinner. I always work over newspaper, work with good ventilation and a fan going. You don't want to ever breathe in any more of these fumes than you have to. So, in this case, what will happen is the drooling and dripping will fall into the newspaper, and I'll take that right outside to a garbage can. I won't leave that in the house because it just gases off and stinks up the whole house. You always want to work with M600 with some really good, the best ventilation possible. It cuts very quickly with M600. The whole trick, keep it wet, keep the paper wet, and the job will go so quick your head will spin. Again, the thing we're trying, see we're starting to break through there? Well, because we glassed this, that's not really a problem. Now this particular block is real good for getting around corners like this. And you're real lucky if you can work comfortably with rubber gloves. You're really fortunate. My trouble is I have some jobs I have trouble with rubber gloves, and this is one of them. If you keep it soaking wet, now if you have a helper, the neat thing is he can be the one spraying and wiping, and you can just go like a, you know, like a firehouse. What the hell's a firehouse? Who makes up these words? Yeah, we're already half done with this. You can see how many flaws in this there really were, too. It didn't look bad until you put this primer on, and then... That's what the newspaper does, is absorb all this stuff as we get done with it. Anyway, we're ready to put a coat of Brodak primer on here, another coat, and we'll repeat this process, sand it over and over and over until we're happy with the results. And it won't matter. The weight doesn't matter. You can keep sanding it, put it on, take it off, but it won't really matter. I think it's a paintable day out there, but I'm going to have to go to see how cold it is. Things, especially in cold weather, I always put a nut or a bolt or something in the primer bottle, because of course Brodak primer is loaded with solids. That's the reason it works so well. So you've got to keep them in suspension. Hey, it's cold out here. Why didn't somebody tell me it was this cold? I like to spray the primer about 40 or 50 psi. So I'll tell you one thing, when you wet sand out all these little low areas, you think you have a good part until you sand it about the third or fourth time and you see all these little glitches. You see how nice this covers. And once it dries, you can candle it, find all the little mistakes in it. And in a case like this, it doesn't matter if you get an even coat or not. We're going to sand it. Well, we're going to sand this coat off, and probably 2 or 3 more. We'll just redo this over and over again until we feel we have the plug as nice as possible. And then we'll have to mount it to a base plate, buff it out, and the Brodak primer buffs beautifully, by the way. I can see we still have a ridge over there to deal with. Again, I'll just repeat this process as many times as necessary. Anyway, these videos from Paul are just fabulous. And one of them is a little tribute here, obviously, to Gary Levitz as I put this away for the day. Anyway, hey, we'll sand this down, and if you'd like, again, if you'd like a copy of these Reno videos to share, just give me a holler. Now, I opened up the mail today. This is from my good friend Warren Walker, who sent me this great thing, the light we have in front of the house now. Now we have outdoor decorations and a gigantic electric bill. What I wish he'd do is send me the money for the bill for the electric. Anyway, and I thought this was great. He sent an assortment, and you know, I just got done using these. In fact, my hands are still dirty from using them. But I'm going through now. These are soft, and these are all available, he says, from a beauty supply place. We got some real hard, heavy-duty ones. They all work wet. And some that I've never seen before. I mean, these are like Bud McKnight. I guess what they really use them for is for doing that. But for doing inside cowlings and inside composite blocks. Some rough ones. And he sends this one, and with a little note, he says, this one just reminded me of him. Yeah, I bet. Warren, they're great. By the way, he also sent, the reason I put this on the video, these are little screws that have a safety wire hole in them. Oh boy, maybe we can use these on our belt cranks. I don't know. I guess we'll never have to buy another screw for our belt. Now, the tape that he sent, I don't know what this really is. It looks like packaging tape. I guess you could make some cockpit interiors out of this. We'll certainly save a piece of this. This would make when we make the little seat belt harnesses and stuff, and it's sticky on one side. Ah, but the biggest thing, this is what I love about presents. What I love about Christmas. What am I talking about? Also, and believe me, we'll get a poster size frame for this. Look at this, a great Spitfire poster with the artwork. Warren, again, thank you very much. I really hope, Warren, you're enjoying the heck out of these videos. We're going to have this hanging in the room. Look at even the detail shot. Anyway, great. And we are ready to do Christmas. It's Christmas Eve, and we're ready. Now, obviously, I have to get a frame. Everything we have in here, of course, is framed in our... I'm surprised how many people have responded to liking the idea of a Spitfire bedroom. Hey, I don't know if I've invented anything here or what. Anyway, we're well on our way. After Christmas, we're going to make a real nice bookshelf for all our collection of Spitfire memorabilia. Some stuff I haven't had a chance to even put it on the video yet. I have some gas attack stuff. Hey, it's just been, I got to tell you, this has been the most fun project to work on. And Warren, I appreciate it. It's Christmas, and the family's already starting to come in here. And boy, I'll tell you, everybody that's seen this room so far, I don't know why. I have no idea. Maybe they're all as crazy as I am. Seem to think it's a cool idea. Boy, when I think how many hours went into all the detailing of these models. Whew. Unbelievable. I guess what you're really looking at here is 4 years of my life. 4 years of Karen's life. Anyway, we have really enjoyed making this room. We're adding to it. Warren, again, thank you. I tell you, I'm just surprised that so many people have responded to this in a way I would have never even thought possible. Even Ken Sleepy Dawson even sent me this little guy here. It's been so much fun. And we got the V-Day posters, and Elliot Scott has sent some stuff we haven't had a chance to put up yet. More stuff coming. Joe Adamusco has not seen the room yet. He's due to be here Tuesday, and he hasn't seen the room yet. I'm sure he's gonna, hey, maybe we can get him to hang. Joe, we could hang your 2 Spitfires over here if you're not gonna fly them. Hey, we could rent you some museum space. Anyway, it's Christmas Eve. Yeah, I'm gone flying. Gone to have my Christmas Eve dinner with my family. Thing I forgot to mention. Oscar Van sent this big tray of cookies, and there's only one problem. I ate them all before they ever got to be on video, so rather than just video in a box, I'll video this nice plate. Anyway, Oz, thanks, Catherine, and everybody that sent me little tokens of appreciation. I really appreciate it. It's the thought, it's the cookies that count. Well, Christmas is over, and we had probably the best Christmas of my whole life. I got a lot of new tools for the shop, things I hope I can test and see if they'll work well. Put a couple of them up on a video, but before that, in today's mail, a picture from Larry Shoemaker and Paul Walker's VSC winning Cobra, Fox 35. Larry, of course, is one of the people we've known for a long time, and really one of the good people in the world of stunt. Larry, we'll pass the photo on to Stunt News, and let's look at some of the new tools we got for Christmas. I think we can use every one of them. First new tool we have for the shop, guess where Karen bought this. I've seen this tool before, and I was skeptical. I didn't know if I could use it. I wanted to buy this tool for the shop when we started doing the fiberglass wheel pants, because I thought, wow, this would be a great, it's got its own little vacuum system, which is important in my shop anyway. And we got some of these. Anyway, we are going to be trying to use some of these. Now, the thing I like about a lot of these modern tools, you know, years ago, these vibrator sanders and things, look at this, I need fingernails. A lot of these tools were just too heavy duty. Let me get a razor blade. They just were too heavy duty for using around balsa wood or little baby wheel pants or even on the tuned pipes. I found a lot of them to be really inappropriate. The only one I really have found super useful is that Porter cable one. And we're sure going to find out before this day is over, or this week. Since we have all these now, this might not even... Okay, I got to figure how to use this. See, what it actually does, it vacuums up the sanding dust, which in my case is a very significant thing. Now, I remember from using this when refinishing furniture that you really have to watch the edge of this is, for all purposes, a razor blade. Not only for cutting into wood, but I usually wind up in the course of the year at least 4 or 5 times chopping myself up real good. And boy, I love after Christmas. There's always the day after Christmas I get to play with all my new tools. Let's see if this works. Now see, it's orbital. It doesn't go in the same circle all the time. And the advantage, if you can see as it slows down, the advantage is we might even be able to use this in some ways working on the tooling. Anyway, this is a tool that sells for under $50. I think it was on sale for 39 bucks if I'm not wrong. But it's the kind of thing, and I always tell Karen, I mean, you know, she buys me all these Christmas presents. Yeah, I save all this. But the big thing I really like to have is tools. The thing I love to have is tools. Another thing I like to take this next time I'm having coffee and just read it, because there's always some features of these machines that you don't think about. In this case, you know, having this little dust collector is a big advantage. Anyway, we're going to be working with this, trying to use it. One of several really, really good presents I got for Christmas, and things we're going to use in the shop and try to, if they work well, we'll pass it on to you. If they don't seem to work, hey, at least you save not having to buy the tool. On my workbench too is I installed one of these multi-plugs, and I leave all the tools plugged in so I can go right down using the sander, the grinder, and especially the little wizard. Now I got another little wizard, and the reason I wanted 2 of them is I want to leave a grinder tip in one and a cut-off wheel in the other, or two different tips, and then I never have to switch the tips. And plus, with the batteries being rechargeable, I can just keep switching the battery to the one that I really, really need. But all of these little things, having them all plugged in, it's amazing how when you have all the tools plugged in, you can get right at the vacuum bench and just hammer out projects one right after another. And one of the things I've always said is you really don't need these tools. You could build a model airplane with a razor blade and a couple of sheets of sandpaper, but this makes it so much more pleasant, easy. The modern tools have these little dust collector things on them. I have this tool, and since I already know that it's a useful tool, I was in Home Depot, I was buying some supplies for the house, and one of the things that I see, they were on sale for $29 with all the tips and all the little gizmos and everything that's in here. I said, well, wow, you know, it doesn't pay not to have it. I mean, this little bag of stuff is probably $20. Plus now I have an extra battery, an extra charger. So now I can just have both of them set up using 2 different bits without ever switching them. So the nice thing is when you see these things on sale, hey, it's even a nice carrying case, you know. But when you see these things on sale, it's amazing that I don't, like the day before Christmas, they have these sales in Home Depot where they're half price. Even at, I think they're 49 or 50 bucks list price. It's a great tool. So now I'll have 2. One, and I can leave in the toolbox and go flying in the summer, go to the Nats, you need to grind something up, whatever. You always need to do something. And having the extra charger and the extra battery and all the extra bits for 29 bucks, I don't see how you can go wrong. Ever seen one of these they usually demonstrate them at Home Depot. Now what I did, I went down, watched the guy gives you a free demonstration of these Home Depot classes here. I don't know what they, I guess they're for real carpenters or something. And I looked at this thing, and I said, wow. I guess we need to put a battery charger by it. This is cordless. And it's really, they call it a rotozip, a spiral saw. But when the right blade is, and they have all different blades, you could buy the blades separately. You probably even could use the blades in some other tool. I couldn't believe it the first time I saw them use this. The guy was cutting 3/4 inch plywood like it was Play-Doh, just making circles. And I said, oh man, is this going to be handy? We make our O-gauge railroad, or for doing some of the plates. I need to cut particle board for making the plates, and I got it, of course, I'm just ready to make the plate, the base for our mold. This, when I actually get to use this, I don't know if I'm going to get to use it soon. This is, if you see this, it's called a roto-zip. They make a corded one and a battery. I got the battery-powered one. Battery-powered one is a lot more money, too. Anyway, I'm going to be using this as soon as possible. And I like to save the carrying case for this one. Might be helpful if I put it back in the right way anyway. One of the things that's real nice, you don't really need tools like this to build model planes, but if you have them, boy, it just makes it so much easier. Anyway, we've had a great Christmas, and now we need to use some of these tools. That's the whole deal. Now, you would think this is not a big deal, but my wife looked all over for this shop clock. She said I'm the crazy tool man, and hey, maybe she was right. I don't know. Anyway, we got a fuselage to sand out. I want to get another coat on it. Well, a couple of things. First off, when I painted this the other day and it was really cold outside, I got a lot of runs in the primer. And I got runs here. As long as you let it dry overnight and you don't try to sand them out right away, runs will, in Brodak primer, runs, and you can see the bad spot right there. That I'm still trying to get that curve exactly the way I want it. Now you can see that took about 3 swipes of the sandpaper and that run was gone. Up here we've got a couple of runs up by the nose. The thing you want to do if you do get a run, and you get a run typically in cold weather, or in my case you're just rushing because you're freezing outside, you can usually let it dry overnight and work it out with the big sanding pad. Now we're coming down, I'm using, let's see, 500. Yeah, 500 right now. I'm going to get the last time I sand this before I put the final, what I hope will be the final time. I'll get it with 1200, and then we'll get that nice buffed out shine on it. But they generally, the runs are not a problem. You know, you just don't want to get them just for fun. But they'll typically come, these are gone. Typically, if you use the pad and some 500 and some M600 paper, they come right out. Now, even after every time you sand this, every time you find more and more little flaws, more and more little flaws. But the only way you're really going to find the last few is by candling it. You got to let the light bounce off it. And it is really cold out there now, so rather than be labored about it, you got to see, I don't care what it weighs. I'm not interested in the weight. So I just want to get everything feathered in and then get the next coat of primer on. I can build this up. I could put 20 coats on this if I have to. But in the final part, I really want to have one really nice smooth finish. It also aids in the release of the part when it comes out of the mold, and that's a critical thing. It is brutally cold out here. Cold. Whenever it's cold, I want to add a little bit of retarder to the primer. I want it to lay down nicer. And I can, in effect, try to get it by putting it in the garage for a while, maybe an hour or so, then bringing it in the house, get it to lay down, so I have the minimum sanding. Important thing, you hear that? Even if you let the primer sit a half an hour, it all sinks to the bottom. This material is loaded with fillers. So you want to constantly shake the primer up. Keep here listening for that little ball rattling around. I put up just an ordinary quarter 28 bolt in there, not anything. We may be only 1 or 2 coats away from having this. Again, I always try to paint the spots that I'm trying to fill, get a little bit extra on them. And obviously we'll try to keep the runs to a minimum here, hoping that maybe we're near the last coat. This will dry overnight, and then we'll evaluate it to see if we need another coat or not. A little bit of retarder in cold weather seems to help, even though probably you could get away without it. Seems to let the primer lay down a little bit nicer. Looks like we may get snow. By the way, this little handle has worked out real well for, you know, this type of finishing. Even though in a traditional plane you probably wouldn't be finishing it this way. But you can always take the thing with a take-apart airplane, you can always take it and glue it together. But when you have a glued-together plane, it's difficult to turn it into a take-apart plane. And we would like to be taking one of these planes to England, making up a box so we can fly in England when we go over there. Maybe give Paul Winter some flying lessons. He really needs them. Poor guy, those videos that Paul sent were great, by the way. Paul, you are okay. I don't care what John Benzik says about you. Anyway, I'm freezing out here. We'll get this in the garage for an hour or so and put it in the house. Once it takes about an hour to just get to the point where it doesn't stink if the gas comes off, and then put it up by a heating vent overnight. How cold it is. That's solid ice on the pond. Hey, you can't even see the fish in here. Yeah, there they are. Solid ice. Whew. All right, this morning, what I'm going to do, even though we can do the next little bit of this while it's mounted on a base plate, I need to take a brand new blade and cut this away from its little base plate here. And we're going to get ready to mount this up and get ready for the final, put the base plate up under the cowling, figure out exactly how we're going to make them the final configuration of the mold for this part. This little thing served us well. I shouldn't complain, it served us well. But now we have the piece ready, and now I need to get a piece of particle board or some piece of old furniture or something to make a base plate out of. I want to use the sanding belt. I want to true all these edges up just once more because a little bit of the glass has dripped down onto the final part. And this will give me a nice tight mount to the base. It's also my reference line. I need to mark the reference line and verify that I haven't moved that even a little bit. Now, because we have 3 planes here, I want to make sure I have I'm going to look to see that on this piece of wood, this is actually the centerpiece of one of our old tables. I want to have a flat plane. It's 3 flat planes. Okay. Now what I want to do, I want to sand just enough of the primer off that I can pick up my center line because I want to verify it. This will only take a second or so. Here it comes right now. And now I can start, let me wipe this off. I can verify because I'm going to use this as my datum line for the whole aeroplane. And I'll do both sides. I just want to verify that I can see that center line. And then I'm going to do a little impression in it so it'll pick up in the mold. Now the 2 things I needed to just is grind this line back in. And I had these marked, the trailing edge end. Those are the 2 reference points that I'm going to need. Because when I get back, when I pull this out of the mold, I'm going to lay out the actual half template of the wing. But I'll need a center line, and that center line is referenced off the bottom of the fuselage here. So we have the end and the height. And we know that that's parallel to the motor mounts and to the tail. So we have 3 parallel lines, hopefully built into this mold. Now with that line established off the table, we're ready to glue this right down. I need to make the wedge for the back, the wedge for the front, a little piece up here, so that this will be easier to pull out of the mold. Of course, I'm trying to make sure that I keep this as flat as possible. And I know that I'm going to have to do a finishing operation on this edge because we never seem to get this edge just right. However, now we know, at this point from the first mold, we've learned how critical this edge is. I've cleaned up this part with M600, this base plate. Again, it's a piece of old furniture, so again, it's no money. Something about no money, I guess everybody likes that. Now with this the little height gauge we have, but you know what, I'm being real critical for this because once I pull this piece out, if I don't have this line in a mold, then I've got to just go by eye. I don't want to. I want it the same on both sides. Oh boy, that's nice. Little gauge was made up by John Pothier, of course. Now, because this is such a shallow angle, it's hard to carve a piece of wood to go in there. So what I thought I'd try to do is get a piece of 64th plywood to go in there, and then shim up the plywood with pieces of balsa. See, what I want to do is I want to put a taper on this. I glued some 1/8 inch balsa to this just to get some support, but I need to dress this edge off. I guess the easiest way to do that's going to be on a belt sander. It's very difficult to get that very shallow angle in there. Here is to get some of that edge. Trying to simulate this exact angle. I don't know if we're going to be able to do it this way. My hope is that as I go along with this, I'll learn all these little tricks, and that the next person ready to do this can kind of steal my ideas. Now I'm just trying to adjust this as I go. To taper down to almost nothing. Okay, the back piece, we just put a couple little braces in there to push it up, and then tack glue that in, and then we're ready to start carving up this piece that we're going to need up in the nose. Alright, now the next piece is just making this up out of scraps as I go along. Let me change the angle here a little bit. Now I can tack this piece in and then make up some supports for the bottom. You're figuring out how to do this. Again, if you do this for your whole life, I'm sure you get a lot better at it than I am. But the hard part is figuring out how to do it. The next thing is I need to carve a little block here. And the reason for that is I just want to have a draft angle up in the front, same as the back. Okay, we have that little piece in. I put an extra little support in here. Now the final thing that's going to need to be done, I want to put a final edge along here, sanding it very carefully, and then get this outside and get a coat of prime on the whole mold, everything all at one time. The little spatulas that we were using before. One of the things I wanted to work on this mold a little bit better than the previous one is this little radius in here. And what I've tried to do is sand in one direction this way, and then lay it down here and sand in this direction, to try to get in that radius. Now, obviously at some point in time the paper clogs up, but because it's sticky back paper, sometimes I can get away with getting 3 or 4 different lines on it, and this way you don't waste the paper no matter what you're sanding. This makes a very handy sanding tool, by the way, as well as for a spatula for sanding bodywork. Now, as soon as I can get outside and get some primer on this, then I can sand that primer in the fillet and get a nice fillet in there. Okay, the last little thing I have to do is sand out these little areas. I just thought I'd get that fillet a little bit neater. And believe it or not, they're predicting snow all day, and I see a couple of snowflakes. I'm going to have to rush on this because I'd like to get a coat of primer on this before it snows. The reason I'm real fussy about the fillet area here is because on the first mold, we really didn't do enough work on this. And I'd like to make this at least a little bit of an improvement. Again, those little pollywogs with the corner, we're not really going to see this in the final mold, but it'll just make for a neater release if I can clean these little areas all up. Again, I'm rushing because if it snows, I have to kind of paint in the garage or something here, and that really is inconvenient, moving a compressor and everything, so this whole thing is inconvenient in cold weather. That's why I'm going to move to California as soon as I retire. I was thinking about Anaheim. I could get some free rent. Around Anaheim would be my first choice. Go flying every day. Oh man, in this cold weather. You can't even touch the spray gun. It's so cold out there. Anyway, this is one of the areas. Again, I'm trying to make little improvements on each part so that in the end, you know, I'll have the best possible part I can have. Now, I just hope I can get out there and get this painted before. I want to get at least one more coat of primer on the whole mold and then do a 1200 sanding. Okay, it looks like we're going to get some painting in before it snows. I think it's cold out here. It is freezing. Oh, it's ice on a pond. Now this is going to be a little, oh man, is it cold out here. Anaheim, yeah, that's my first choice. I want to get the radius. I don't want to get any primer up there if I can help it. But I want to get it all around the edges of this. And get it out onto the base plate about an inch. Some up here where we sanded through. Anytime it's really cold like this, I like to put just a little bit of extra retarder in the paint. Look at that. Drool on it. Whew. Got a little spot up here I wanted to work on too. And the main thing is I want to get my bacalat down in the cellar where the heat is on. We finished up the mail and we got that guy up there drying by the heating vent. It usually takes an hour in the garage to get it to lose some of the smell. Anyway, while it's drying up for possibly a touch-up or a second coat, this is the mold that we had trouble with that I, because of my own lack of expertise, crushed in the first try, and maybe I'll do it the second time too. But what I want to do is I want to check this for any more flaws. I've gone over this. So, you know, I know there's one right about up here. I can feel it with my finger. So I'm going to go over these molds while I have the primer in the gun and while I'm basically waiting for things to dry. Try to get this, and the deal is I'm waiting for the gel coat to come. I don't think I have enough to do all three of them, but I may have time to do one today if everything goes right. Now I'm glad that I actually ruined that first mold. I know that sounds hard to understand because there were a few flaws. One of them was right up in here when I look at the part that came out, and that crack that was over here is now fixed, and where the scoop is ultimately going to be there was another one. What I'm doing now is I'm sanding this with Windex because there's no chance I'm going to go through the raw wood now. I got enough primer on here. And Windex is a little less smelly for the sake of Karen, who if she comes down and beats me with a shoe, then my day is ruined. So trying to be a good husband here and a good modeler at the same time. But a lot of times you have to make a choice. Is it going to be a good modeler or a good husband? And sometimes I make the wrong choice. I'm sure Karen thinks that anyway. Anyway, we're going to get this primed. They predict snow the last 3 or 4 days. We get 2 flakes and it stops snowing and the sun comes out. Baloney. I'm moving to Saskatchewan. I'm moving to Alberta. Get some real snow. It finally feels like I got that floor out, and that was really bothering me. That was one of the things that was bothering me about this. And I had a rough spot up here. Seems like I've made some improvement to the mold anyway. I'm going to get out there. The snowflakes are starting to fall. Now this is always the part of making a mold that, this is the part you're actually going to see. I got 1200 sandpaper. I'll finish this up with a whole bunch of Gorhams. And we'll get on our 4 coats of wax, 4 coats of PVA. This is pretty much going to be redundant to what happened on the last video when we made that mold. So I won't bother just going over and over and over it. You can check that out. But it's the same thing. A lot of polishing. Because it's the polish that really lets it release and gives you a nice finish in the final part. And in this case, you know, I really want this to come out nice. Since this is the second mold that we have like this, we have a crooked one, a broken one, and we'd like to get a good one now. But I guess that's part of, you know, in essence, what you could learn from my mistakes. And boy, I sure would have loved to learn from somebody else's mistake if there was a video available. The only problem is, nobody's made the video. Up till now. Anyway, now there's people like Larry Cunningham that are interested in molding, just as an example of somebody who has an interest in it. And even though they may not be doing something this elaborate, the whole deal is you can use the technology from one mold. Each mold is a separate entity. And as soon as we finish with the 1200, get into the Gorhams, this really starts to take on a nice shine. Ooh, it even feels nice. Anaheim, that's where I'm moving. Boy, just what's nice when you're dealing with something like that has a nice base to it. You're putting this in your lap, it's hard to get a nice grip. This is just perfect. You can even do an old trick from my days as a shoe shine boy. In essence, it's like buffing out a plane. There's no difference except that it's Brodak primer, and it buffs out beautifully. But it really makes it, now, you know, one thing about a take-apart plane, well, you never have the wing and tail in the way when you're doing this kind of work. Or when you get down to the part all wax, then it really starts to look nice. This is when you get like some idea of what this final part will look like. Need 4 coats, roughly an hour apart. Okay, the next step is going to be obviously 4 coats of PVA, and let's see, a miracle may happen. I may be able to get them on without a run. Brodak primer, I love it. The PVA is dry on all the parts. Next step, we're going to mix up the gel coat, and again, we've done this all before. I'm going to mix the gel coat up, paint it, put the second layer on with the cloth. We're looking for any little spots that still need to be touched up on this. You know, looks like we're finally ready to make the mold. Again, the resin system we're using redundant, same as the first time through. And we want to mix it accurately with a grain scale. Only this time we're going to really beat the system. We're going to use a big brush right from the start. Like all resins, mix it 2 minutes after you think it's cured. Well, I'm ahead of myself. When you think it's mixed, mix it 2 minutes more. Now what I did, I turned the heat in the shop way down, so I'll get a little bit extra working time, get this to flow out. Again, this is the tooling resin I got from George Spar. You can see it's nice and gooey. Same as we've used on the previous mold, only this time we're not going to crush the mold. All right, ready to paint. Now, because this mold is so similar to the other one, I'll tell you, this is what I screwed up on this one. I ran out of cloth. I used up every scrap of cloth in the whole shop. Ran down to the body shop. They only had one package, and it wasn't really enough. So I'm going to kind of let this dry overnight. I got the other two parts done. And I'm just using up all the gel coat I have, just to try to make up for the fact that I ran out of cloth here. Again, one of the good lessons to be learned is always have. I'm not even going to ever buy a quart of this stuff again. Just buy a gallon. Quart goes too quickly. Anyway, we're going to put this aside up by the heater to dry. Put every little scrap of cloth that we can on here to reinforce it. It doesn't have to be pretty on the outside, that's for sure. And what I do is, see, I put these right under the heating vent to try to get them so overnight. Well, I hope I'm going to be able to work on this tomorrow. Now we have the other heating vent right up here. It looks pretty sloppy from the outside, but I hope we're going to have a decent mold when we come back. Back tomorrow. Now what I did, I went down to the local store where they sell, body shop supplies. What's funny is, I already bought all their cloth and I don't have any more. And I wanted to do two things, so I thought I could accomplish two things at once. The mold is nice and hard now, rock hard in fact. But see how rough this edge is because I used up all my scraps? And this one is even worse. So what I thought would be a good idea, again, we do this with prop molds, we make them with Bondo. I'm going to mix up some Bondo and try to get a coating on here that I can sand. This is kind of rough. It'll also reinforce it just a little bit. Now it would be better if I had, the reality is here, I should have had about 10 more yards of cloth. I have about 10 layers on this. But I want to take this and in essence paint on a coat of Bondo so that when I put this in the vacuum bag I can kind of do a rough sanding on this side. I just have a suspicion that after I use this mold, these little things are going to be a problem, these little rough spots. They're going to poke a hole through the vacuum bag. And again, this is an experiment anyway, and then what's the worst that can happen here? We'll make the mold over again. We already have, this is the second one. We'll make it over a third time if we have to. Again, I hope this is going to serve two purposes. This will be very easy to sand, of course. Now you really don't need to make this fancy. I'm just trying to get out all the runs that I possibly can and pack it in. Again, this is an experiment. I'm not sure if this is going to be like the pro way to do it or not. But it's not realistic to think, at least not to me it isn't, that when you do some new technology that you're going to just hit it right on the first shot. There's usually the first couple of steps on the learning curve are all full of splinters, and I step on every one of them. Anyway, Bondo, a lot of good things at Bondo. It dries relatively quickly. This brand doesn't seem to stink as bad as some of the polyesters. Polyester tends to have a pungent odor, and it's the styrene that you smell usually. Anyway, then we'll put this aside to dry for a day. Even though you probably could work on this an hour from now. I have too many other projects in the shop here to work on. And then we'll be ready to pull this apart. While it's drying here, I set up the little orbital sander. I just wanted to get a feel for how this was going to work. I'd like to figure some way of getting whoa, that's nice, of getting a buffing pad on this. Maybe I have to make my own. Very nice, doesn't tend to dig in. Again, the only thing I tell you is watch the edge. That edge gets sharp. Anyway, that looks like we're going to find a lot of uses for that tool. Anyway, what I'm doing while that's drying, I have to wait a day. I'm going to make up an additional set of wheel pant molds so I can make more than one set at a time. Obviously, I just wanted to use it as a way of testing my sander. Make the wheel pants with that little recess in it for the gear. Of course, you have to make 4 mold halves, so that's the reason we try to make it as practical as possible to do that. Here's a set that's ready to be sanded, and we'll try that sander. Anyway, I love to test tools. With this, the 4-cavity mold, I can only really make 1 pair a day, and I need to be able to make more than 1 pair a day if I expect to make any money with these. No guarantee of that, of course. Okay, long invisible from the world of model aviation, but back in full force. Joe Adamusco and Sue. Sue's checking out the bathroom, stealing the soap.
I didn't want to be in this video, so I'm
Sue, look at this.
So this is that Mark 24 wing that is not curved elliptically as the original Spitfires, but it's got this dink in the trailing edge and a similar dink in the leading edge.
Right, it's similar to...
and this isn't to be confused with the clipped wing. This is...
No, this is a Mark 24 wing.
This is a nearly scale.
If
you look at this. Swept forward leading edge, or trailing edge. Big flaps. Big.
Well, it's kind of an Al Rabe thing, right?
Well...
Yeah, you've got that look like an Al Rabe airfoil on me.
It's not an Al Rabe airfoil. This is a special, unique thing Dave Downey put together for
How much of a sweep is in the horn?
I don't know what the angle is.
4 degrees, 5 degrees?
But this is the one I want to build next. And it can be built on rods. And it's got a lot of air. This is only 700 square inch wing though. 61 inch span. But swept forward, and I think with a lifting airfoil that this has, these big flaps.
Big flaps, yeah.
And this is the...
This is the stab?
This is the stab. So like 142% of the wing. And, you know, from...
I like the wing shape. The wing is nice.
And,
that's beautiful.
I'm thinking...
Did you come up with a fuse drawing yet for this?
Well, I'll show you what I have there. But it's just like an upgraded stuntress. But
yeah,
this would fit into like a bubble top, like my yellow spit or your bubble top spit.
You could actually retrofit using all the shells from the Spitfire.
But this is only 700 square inches.
But it's got the big flaps.
It's got big flaps, and it's got a thick airfoil. The thing that was tough to do was to get the airfoil to progressively...
Yeah, I know, that's rough.
Because it's swept, it's curved in the front, and it's got a straight trailing edge.
Right, Right.
but it's swept forward. So it's a unique deal. But I'm anxious to do this. This will be my next wing. 61-inch span, big flaps, and the flaps can be made bigger or smaller, and it's still, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And
the 24 is a pretty, and you already got the canopy mold for a 24 in our inventory.
Just an
this is
upgraded
the stuntress.
Now,
Okay.
can I look at one of those pipes again and lay it over here
Sure.
and see how that
Sure.
would fit in? Because this is the pipe that I got from Randy, the one with
yeah.
61. And my plan was with the wing, I would have a special spar that I could actually have a concave. But if you got a
No,
pipe
you
that
don't
has a
need
bend-
that.
All right.
So you always have to take it to account. That's why I put that little bit of a curve in the header when you have a thick wing aeroplane.
Which
That's why you need to have several different choices of pipe.
Depends on what your thrust lines are too. Everything.
Oh, sure.
This is real tight because this worked well. I know
Yeah.
that.
Wing gear on this too?
Oh, absolutely. I'll never have a plane with fuse gear again, because I know, man, the gear.
Well, it'd be interesting to see the difference.
Well,
You know, when you can compare them, and especially when you got to deal with
well, for me right now, the idea is that I'll be flying off of mostly grass fields,
right.
and you would think the opposite would be true, that you'd want to have fuse-mounted gear to run off of grass fields. That's not true. I think the gear mount, you know, you put them forward, you can make them longer or use different size wheels and everything.
Well, you got a lot of choices both ways, that's for sure.
But the wing is
The wing is the thing.
wing is the thing, absolutely.
This tool I found so far, even though I have a lot of these nylon wedges, the old spackle knife, and I've been just trying to go around the edge here as carefully as possible, trying not to beat the heck out of it. Again, this is one of the things that just takes a little patience. You can start to hear. You can start to hear just a little bit of the. But you don't want to. What you don't want to do is just grab it and break it up. I want to loosen it up all around. No matter how many times you do this, you're always thinking, is this part ever going to release? Oh. Even I was watching that video about the guys in Germany, I guess it is, that make these real high-end scale models. And they're releasing a mold, and the guys are all standing around, oh, Achtung, are we going to ever get this released? Yeah. Oh, sounds like we're making some progress here. Of course, the whole idea is not to damage the plug, so in case you want to, and in this case, we've already had to remake the mold once. Whoops. 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 Looks like we pulled the front off the plug here. Whoop. See, now here's a typical problem. We'll have to be real careful about pulling the front of that plug out, because I don't want to damage this, but otherwise it looks like I've got a perfectly smooth surface here. This looks like it's going to be fine. Obviously what happened here, and it was just what I was talking about, it felt like I had already chiseled this away, but I must have had a part hanging on. And what happened is a piece came out, not unsalvageable, but what I'm going to try to do is real carefully, I don't want to scratch the mold if I can possibly, see if I can possibly pull this out without damaging it anymore. Anyway, this is the skills. The other part came right out, by the way. That part is just about ready, and we know it's perfectly true, so that's ready to make parts from. That'll be a thrill. Now, one of the tricks I know from going way back is I can soak this in hot water, but then I'll lose the, well, I'm going to lose it anyway. I don't know what I'm worried about. It turned out, the luck of the Irish here, I didn't have to wet it, and that looks like we have a real nice. Now I have this piece. Obviously I'm going to save both of these pieces, and to rebuild this, it wouldn't be out of the question. But now, from this point on, now I'm playing high-risk poker because I only have one. I really have no instant way of duplicating this mold. So I'm going to have to be real careful with this from now on. A Strager repair if I ever had to put this back together. Let's hope I don't. Let's hope I can get usable parts. And let's hope I'm on the upper part of the learning curve here. lessons, and the reason, you know, you might be thinking, well, why doesn't he just take all this off the video so I'll look like a rocket scientist? Nah, learning this, and I'm learning the slow, hard way, believe me, to make these molds. And if you truly want to make molds like this, you're going to have little episodes like this. It's part of the mold making process. What I'll do is I'll tape this up just in case, and obviously I'll save all these parts out in the garage or somewhere, because if I ever want to go back and make this over, or say I want to make a later model Mustang, I can just rechange this part, leaving all this the same. I know all the other dimensions will stay pretty much the same. Just don't want to lose the plug. See, another area I could improve my technique on, and of course I'm still well down in the learning curve here, is to leave some of the heavier glass cloth out over. Now see, I didn't have enough cloth. I was skimping on cloth here, because the advantage would be I can get my spatula underneath the cloth. Well, when I go to get under the resin, it's real hard to get under the resin. So there's another valuable lesson to learn. So what I'm going to do is just real carefully go around the whole edge of this part. Not try to rush this at all, even if it takes me an hour or so. Just go around, because I basically can't get under the original part. I didn't leave enough cloth down there, but hopefully I can salvage this and not have to do it over. I guess we're going to find out in about a half an hour. This is one of the critical things that I've found, and of course some of the thing I want to pass on is being able to get either the nylon tools or the spatula underneath here. By leaving a little more of this cloth, I could have really made this a lot easier on myself. Of course, that's the whole story of my life. But getting that going around the whole perimeter, hopefully I won't break this plug up either when I go to get it out. I guess that's the real education here, a real way to learn it. Unfortunately, what happened is by releasing this part around the whole perimeter, the plug came out with the part, and I don't know, I'm just going to have to think about how I want to pull this out now. But the lesson here to learn is I need to glue the plug to the base plate with more than just a CA joint, possibly an epoxy joint, something a little bit stronger than that. And now the challenge would be to try to get that plug out. I know this part is not going to be in great shape when I get it out, but I'm trying to save the overall shape if I can. Trying to get some of this now. All these little valuable lessons, believe me, this is how you learn. And as a famous line I remember from a movie from I can't remember the name of the movie now, but with Madonna, with the girls' baseball team, there is no crying in baseball. I was really hoping this was going to release in one piece, but, well, we're going to be chipping away at it. The idea is to try to salvage the plug, if at all possible, not destroy, totally destroy. Now, if I would have had this glued down better to the original part, and I'll have to remember another thing, to sand the original base plate to get a better glue joint, because it didn't seem like that glue joint was real solid. Probably going over old varnish. Good news and bad news. After about an hour of chiseling away, you can see the part. Now, I can see another advantage to this, another tremendous advantage. Had I known this ahead of time, I would have put 4 or 5 layers of fiberglass on this. But instead, this piece, even though it came out, well, semi-unscathed. I don't know if you call that unscathed. It's not. If I have to, I'll just build another plug. But the good, and of course the bad news is you have to sit through all these tragedies. The good news is it looks like we have a relatively usable, looks like kind of like a little bathtub or something, doesn't it? And we're going to trim this all off. Next step, of course, is to go over to the saw, trim all around the edges. Next step is to have a margarita or something. But this has been a real ordeal getting this apart. We lost the main plug. and we probably could salvage the bottom plug. It puts me in a position of at least having usable molds that at least can run prototype parts here. And that's, even if I have to go back and rebuild the plugs and the molds, at least I can use these to make prototype parts from. And I'll get these trimmed and polished up. I'm trying to get the trim so it's even, so when I put it in the vacuum bag, again, another lesson I probably could learn is to bring the cloth out at least an inch, and I should mark the mold so that in essence I can have a little bit neater edge. See, the edge is all uneven here, and I'll work that out on a belt sander. But believe me, win, lose, or draw, I'm learning a lot and having no fun at all. Look at this hairy stuff hanging off here. I end up using a tape as a rough guide, but I still want to trim this off, and I want to sand a lot of this off flat, because I want to be able to, again, what we learned from putting in the vacuum bag, I don't want to have any razor blade edges or anything. And just for my own, let's hope, well, this one is nice and straight. Let's hope I've learned enough that we're going to be making usable parts out of these very soon. I've been saying that for too long. Again, the idea of getting all these, as many rough edges as possible out, and the last thing I'll do is clean out the PVA, and there's some little spots in here where I wanted the center line to pick up, and it did. I won't have any trouble picking that center line up. Anyway, get this all cleaned up and as smooth as possible. The idea being I don't want to have a hole in a vacuum bag when we go to vacuum bag this. And the main thing here is I'm taking some SOS pads and trying to feel for any little sharp spots, any little sharp edges. Again, the whole idea of this is I don't want to lose, because I don't really have the plugs in perfect condition. I don't have the plugs, period. This now is I'm out on, you know, having, here's a sharp edge right here. I'm basically back to having one set of molds. Now, I have the choice now, if I wanted to make a casting from this mold, and I'm going to think about doing this. Just making a male part out of fiberglass so I could remake the mold if I ever have to. But just one of the choices I have to think about while I'm doing this. Again, there's nothing beats the PVA comes right off with the water. Trying to get rid of all the sharp, anything that might put a hole in that vacuum bag when it's under maximum pressure. So far it looks like the Bondo. Now today the molds are all prepared. They're waxed, 4 coats of part all wax. And this looks like we have plenty of PVA on here. This is 4 coats sprayed. Now the only problem is I haven't received my 10-yard shipment of material, and I don't know if it's going to be in for a week or so. We're in limbo. So I have 1 piece of scrap left, and I wanted to try. Now the first piece we made with 2 layers was a little bit on the thin side. So I'm going to try making one with 4 layers, and that's probably going to be able to use up, I'm trying to picture, because I need to put it on it. But yeah, I'll be able to get 4 layers out of this. And I'll run off a little test part while we're waiting for the rest of our material to come in. Again, always having the material all prepared ahead of time. One of the things I learned right away, once you start mixing resin, you don't really have time to do any of this trimming. And since this is going to be a test part, try to trim away a lot of this excess. Because of the shape of this part, I'd like to get it on a bias if I can, but it's not going to really be possible with this piece. The other 3 will be on a bias. we had with the first mold, of course, was using a wrong bleeder cloth. And of course, the whole reason for this test is I want to see, each time I lay up a part, each time I run a test, each time I do anything, really, I'm learning more about how to handle this material. Be the same thing if you bought your first block of balsa wood. Well, you find out how to carve it, how hard you have to press to sand it, how the dope adheres to it. We're in the learning curve. Anyway, we're going to be using the black, 4 layers of the black carbon. 1 layer of this will do for sure. It's got a wrinkle in it. I guess that's not going to matter. Got the stuff all cut up. I'm going to mix the resin, prepare the vacuum bag, same as on the previous thing we did. We wrecked the mold. Let's see if we can get one without wrecking a mold. This will be a real thrill. So we're going to lay 4 of them in there, then the bleeder cloth, press it all out, lay it in a vacuum bag. Now I thought of another thing. I could kind of mark this because this doesn't really want to conform, and I could pinch up the edges on the first part. Maybe pinch up the edges on all the parts so it would kind of lay in a mold a little bit better. See, the carbon, unlike e-glass, is very rigid. I think we'll do this on the first part. I think we'll do it on all the parts. I have nothing to lose because I don't have the other material. And we'll see how this works. I'll take basically all the parts and just put a little cut in them. The idea being that they'll lay down in a mold, just conform a little bit easier. Thing again I learned from the first mold, I can't glue these things on. So what I'm trying to do is just lay some wood in place here. Maybe I'll put some tape across it so it can't spread open. I need to have a little way of confining this. Again, you got to kind of invent this as you go along. Things, when I was learning, doing my apprenticeship in a machine shop, one of the things I learned right away is you got to be able to hold things. Yeah, it's nice to be able to put a part in a lathe, but you have to be able to grab it somehow, or a milling machine, or whatever. Now, this is my own little invention, kind of invention here, because I figured maybe I can confine this, knowing how to hold this, because when I put it in I don't want to have this glued on. What happened, you know, you've seen the last tape, you know. So now, trying to learn and build on that knowledge, maybe this will hold it. And I have I'll put, in fact, what I'll do here, just so I don't ruin 2 good blocks of balsa wood. Because I'm going to need to do exactly the same thing, and it's obviously the best thing is to practice on small parts. In this case, we're using up scraps of material. But always keep in mind, each time you do one of these, or something like this, just like building a plane, you want to learn something you can put in the bank. I think that'll be a good way of holding it. I have the vacuum pump prepared. I have the bag prepared, and we're ready to start doing the layup. Now we're going to do this test using the 125 resin. It's Pro Set. It's a very high-end resin. It needs to be post-cured with a curing agent number 237. This is really, so far, the test that we've used on this, and I've also made some landing gear and wheel pants with this resin. This is a real, I'd say the word friendly, but except for the fact that you need to be real careful about the post-cure and the waiting time until it achieves its final physicals. But we're going to be doing a little more experimenting with resin. And one of the things, you know, obviously when you post-cure it, we need to figure out if we'd be able to post-cure this out of the mold. I'd much rather post-cure it outside the mold. That we don't know about, but that'll be one of the things I want to accomplish with this test. Now, as always, I'm going to mix, and once I think it's mixed, give it an extra 2 minutes. One of the little tricks I learned, because the resin tends to be stolen from the edge, I've always found that, in fact, I'm hoping this is going to be a usable part. It isn't even a test. Now, in the time since I've mixed the resin, I found that it's going to be at least a week until I get my 10-yard shipment. So what I'll do is, in the meantime, I won't put it, none of it will affect the video, of course. I'm just going to put this video on hold and go back to working on the wooden fuselage. And that, I guess, is part of the advantage of having several projects going at once. But if it seems like, you know, there's a time gap in here, it really isn't. I'm just waiting for material. And And I would suggest anybody really, you know, going to do this, get the material in-house before you get too excited about making it. A lot of times these companies promise you the moon, and you don't get the material for 3 weeks. Now it looks like those little slits are going to work. Get the first layer in here. Now each time I put a layer in here, I'm just trimming off. And having these slits in here really does make this, it's really a good idea. At least easier for me to do this. Alright, that first layer is trimmed. Each time I add a layer, I'll trim that little excess off. And I want to make sure each one of these layers gets completely saturated with resin. Okay, with 2 layers in, it's starting to conform a little bit. Now luckily this material has a pot life of about an hour and a half, so I can really not be concerned with rushing through this. 2 more layers to go on, and then we'll be ready to slide it right over into the vacuum bag. We got this is our Midgley bleeder cloth here in place. 4 layers trimmed, ready for the vacuum bag. The mount, by the way, worked perfectly. Now we're ready to slap this sucker in. Set up the other end of the bag. While the pump is going, I like to try to see if I can get as few wrinkles in the final part as possible. I got a wrinkle right there. If it really looks terrible, get these edges as nice as possible. Now I don't know if I'm going to get away with having these parts so short. Looks like I may have to lay them out further. And we'll see how this bleeder cloth works. Oh, I see resin coming up already. Okay. And of course, there's nothing to stop me at this point in time in releasing the pressure. Just pull the tube off. If there is a wrinkle I can't get out in the final part. Now, I find anything to do with technology challenging. It's the challenge of doing it. It's hard to explain to somebody that isn't challenged by things. They just want to do them. Now, I don't find that to be important. What I find is that knowing there's a challenge and knowing I can, well, we don't know if we have a part yet. We'll see when this dries up. But we're basically going to have a gap of about a week before we come back to this video anyway. In the meantime, we'll work on that other fuselage. Maybe get the wing saddle set up. This will sit in the bag for the next 2 days, and we'll pull it out and see if we have a usable part. Okay, the time has finally come. Due to the magic of video, our test piece is ready to pull out of the bag. We've let the pressure bleed down, and it's time to pull it out and see if we have a usable part here. Really waiting for this, impatiently. I've been waiting a long time to see if this part was going to come out. In the meantime, the couple of days we've waited, I have more bagging supplies from Midgley that came in. So we're kind of getting ready to give this our best shot. And I had a couple of phone calls come in from people that are obviously watching the video. And they're thinking like in 2 weeks I'm going to have parts for sale. Nah, it's not going to happen. You know, something like this, I'll give you an example, just figuring out how I'm going to line the motor mount up in that shell. It takes time, and I'm trying to, you know, there's really nobody I can even copy if I wanted to here. And there's so many variables, especially that I'm new to this vacuum bag and stuff, and still breaking molds. Now look, I can't even get the part out of the bag. This shows you what I know. Always reuse the little fitting. I don't reuse the bag, but I'll reuse the fitting. And you can see there's one thing is the vacuum bag has sucked out all the epoxy, and it's all laying in the bag here. using these fittings over and over again, which is... Now, I'm assuming you could even use, I'll have to talk to Midgley, you could even use these bags over and over if you didn't care about and we don't care about the internal finish on this. I'm not looking to get a nice finish inside the fuselage. Again, I won't throw this one away, even though I have other ones. It seems like it could be that you could use these over and over and over, and I don't even know it. I don't want to be throwing these away. See how it actually squeezed out the epoxy, and now it's like a thin shell. That's why I have the PVA on here, and I want to be real careful about pulling this out. I might even have a use in some worlds. Maybe this part may even be usable. I did this up with 4 layers of carbon, so I could put a micrometer on it and see how much thickness I'm going to need for various parts of the fuselage. I'm guessing we could live with that finish. For my second part, wow, that's stiff. Now I don't know what that weighs. I got to trim it all off it. But that is nutsy strong. All right, I'm very encouraged by this first release. And the vacuum side is even nicer. But see, I won't care because I need to scuff this up anyway. So now the trick is, while I have this piece out, I'll clean the mold up, clean all the old PVA out, and I can very conveniently now load up, put the PVA on the next piece. Now I can do that bottom block. I can lay out a test piece in a bottom block. In 2 days from now, I only want to do one at a time. 2 days from now I'll be able to run the fuselage shell. Wow, this is encouraging. Anyway, nice to have a plane that you get some dodo with a watch. He doesn't put a dent in it. This is the part we need to get settled into and see if we've done it right or if we can make it better. This is the release cloth, the blue release cloth that I got from Dave. I guess it's called peel ply. I don't even know what they call it. The real name. I have a roll of it here, a big giant roll. Yeah, now see, this is what should have happened to our first piece. And what this does, this has already absorbed all the extra epoxy. Now imagine, this is how much epoxy would still be down in this mold. It also takes off, I don't know if you notice, all the wrinkles. So you wind up with, wow, this is really encouraging. You also wind up with a surface that's relatively toothy, so when you go to glue 2 pieces together, let's see if this really does work. Oh. Oh, I love being able to do that without putting a dent in the plane. Anyway, our first piece is out of the mold. A milestone in our development. I want to trim all this off before I post-cure this part. I tried trimming it with one of the many shears I have. It's just not used. It's just easier to grind it off, I think. Small part. Anyway, I want to do an accurate test to see if the post-curing changes the weight at all. I'm not sure about that. Seems to trim up relatively easily, so. Even after all this trimming, you still have the layer of PVA on here. I want to clean all that off, dry the part. I want to weigh it. And I'll weigh it to within 1/10 of a grain, and then I'll set the post-curing oven up, and within a 16-hour period we'll know if it's a gain, loss, or nothing. Boy, does this, having these shells like this, once you can make, what I've found out in life in general, it doesn't even have to do with modeling, is once you can make a small part, it's only a matter of time before you can make a big part. And once you can make a big part, sooner or later you can make a lot of big parts. So I really am, I'll tell you, I'm elated. Hope I know what that word means. Anyway, this was 4 layers, and I have a feeling just from looking at this, we could be thinking about doing 3 layers. This part is, let me get my hands clean. This part is plenty solid. It has that real nice finish on one side. I mean, God, If you can get wings to come out of the mold like that, has the textured side, has a very even texture, uniformly thick during the whole piece. All right, I'm going to set this out to post-cure. Well, conclusion from looking at this part is that we certainly can make this part up with 3 layers. So I'm going to prep the mold, wax the mold, and try to get some of the other parts ready so we can get another vacuum bagging session going here. Now today I prepared all 3 bags. These are the ones Dave Midgley sent down. I have the extra straps. I've got 3 bags ready. The whole deal here is to try to get everything ready when you're going to do a big layup like this. Got all 3 of the molds ready. They're all prepped with PVA. They're all, even a little one, ready to go. Up on the wood blocks so that I can work these. I don't know if I've probably shown making these little supports. And now the deal is here, I want to put each one in a separate bag. I have my my roll here. This is $1,000, this roll, you believe this? I want to cut all the material ahead of time. I'm going to try, now because that last piece I had 4 layers and it was plenty thick, I'm going to try doing the first layup with 3 layers. Just get some idea whether this is going to work. But always have the material ready, have the bags ready, because you only have about maybe, well, we don't know, you're supposed to have about 45 minutes of working time. But what I do is I keep the temperature conditions in the shop real cold, and it gives me a little bit extra working time. And the only thing concerns me on the big mold is, am I going to be able to get that piece out of the back clean? I'm going to put a separate piece in there and then try to get separate pieces here, because back there you just no way you're going to get one piece to lay in there that I can see. This one we know lays up relatively nice. Okay, nobody's going to do it for me. I guess I got to get that material cut and get this guy ready to go. Now you notice when this comes off the roll, see, it's cut on a bias. Now the first little piece we had was only a sample. Now that we have a decent amount, I want to try to line up all the pieces on a bias so that I have a minimum amount of waste. So by doing this, I took a box. I have a box for all my scraps. I don't want to throw any of this stuff away at this price. But one of the things I want to be able to do is cut the biggest pieces out first, and then at the end cut out. I'm trying to lay this out right now because I know I'm going to need 3 layers of this. So obviously what I'd like to do is cut the big pieces first. And then actually I cut the biggest one first. One of the things with this resin, this is the post-cured resin, 125-237. I've noticed a lot of air bubbles in it. I want to let all the air bubbles settle out. I'd like not to have any of them in the final part, especially after all this work going into this. By having everything ready, and because we've already laid the little part out, I assume this is going to be kind of redundant. I got the material all cut. But one of the things, I'm going to let this resin sit just a minute or two. It's just got a few extra air bubbles in it. That could be that I'm stirring. Anytime you have air bubbles, it usually means I'm getting anxious. See, I'm getting too aggressive about stirring. I just want to let all those air bubbles sink out of it. Even though the vacuum bag would probably pull them out. I just hate to have a part. I pull a part out, and these things are so expensive. And then, boink, and right in the middle of it, there's an air bubble. Now, if I remember right, see, the reason I'm doing a small part first, again, because I'm still in the bottom of the learning curve, I know I'm going to have to slit the edges, but I can get a good impression here of how much slitting I need to do. Now, except for the fact that that first part came out with 4 layers heavier than I thought was necessary, because remember, I can always add a little reinforcement later, but what I can't do conveniently is sand off a whole layer. That gets difficult. Tip that I learned in the course of doing many of these, especially Nobler Cowlings, is get the resin to go out over the edge. The reason I want, before I even do the slitting, I want to get it over the edge, because what happens then, otherwise it starts sucking all the resin out of here and you don't get a nice edge. Now as we work on these parts, and I'm going to try to lay all three of them up. I put T-fittings in the vacuum bagging system. Again, I'm going to try to do all three at once. And then I want them to sit in a vacuum bag for at least 2 or 3 days. And the heat from the house, I hope, will get it to the point where we can pull these out of the mold before we do the post-cure. That's the plan anyway. Again, almost everything you do in something like this, you've got to invent it as you go along. I've tried in the past cutting the material where I don't have any overage like this, and I'm just not skillful enough now to kind of interpolate how much extra material I need. That might be coming, but what happens if that's a little bit short now, or if you move the material weave, for like, you know, molding 101, it's best to trim it after you have the first couple pieces in place, or even, I'm going to do it on each piece, because I don't want them getting thin and I don't want it getting dry right at the edge. And I've got to invent most of this stuff along the way, because again, nobody has bothered to make me the exact video I need. And actually, you can't even buy a book that shows this that I know of. Now, it'll be interesting to see what the weight is relative, 2 layers relative to 3 layers, relative to 4 layers. And I need to start building a little database. And then, of course, seeing how stiff the parts are. Because once we get to the part of this that's going to actually hold a motor, and by the way, I have given endless amounts of thoughts to how I'm going to do that, and I still don't have a real plan. Again, because we're going to need to make something kind of unique in that area. All the ends slit. You can see how it's like a tooth pattern, because it's that edge that's sometimes can be a problem, especially on a complex shape. At least, well, I've had problems with it. I want to pat these down. I want to get the peel ply, the bleeder cloth. And it's a good thing I've got shop conditions cold here, or else this would already start to be kicking off. It looks like this would take only a few minutes to do. This takes longer than you think it does, especially while I'm in this very low end of it. See, I'm constantly pushing that down and squeeze. See all that extra resin that comes out? And the vacuum bag takes even more out. By the way, there's no doubt about it that this blue stuff is... Still can't believe I did that the first time, but hey, this is the material of choice. Got this from Dave Midgley. I don't know what the brand name is. Okay, now that I've got a little bit of the feel of using the material, I'm ready to start the bigger parts. Okay, see, now this is ready to put right in the bag, same way we did the first time. That's ready to vacuum bag. Now, the only problem I have here is the bag is just a little bit on the small side relative to this part, but I'm going to try to slide it in anyway. And because Dave sends me these bags, you know, it's hard to complain. It's hard to complain even if you pay for them. Oh no, here it goes. There we go. Now the idea is to pull out the wood. Some of the tricks that, well, I guess they're common to the professionals of the world. But wouldn't it be nice if every trade you ever needed to know or wanted to know or whatever was just, you could just buy up a video, and boy, if somebody had already made this video, boy, would this have been really convenient. Anyway, now that that part is in there, I need to seal the end. I see another problem. See, I have this, I have been putting the fittings too close to the end of the bag, I think. I think I could improve my technique here a little bit by not having it so close to the end. Oh, boy, there's so many things to learn. The world of knowledge. Okay, there we go. I can see hooking up the tubing is a little bit of a pain in there. We go. Press that seal down. Oh! Oh, man, these are tighter than the ones George Spar sent. Wow. Trick, don't put the fitting in don't put the tubing on the fitting until the very end anyway. I haven't turned a pump on yet. to get this kind of in the middle. I want to kind of press it down before I turn the pump on. It's pulling the air out of the bag. I'm trying to really just little by little press this down. So many little things I can improve here as I'm going along, as I'm learning. And you just have to babysit this for a while. Since we've already done this, we've already done one of these on camera. I'm going to cut this off because I want to get at least on the end of this tape, at least one of the other big parts. Now we're basically going to repeat the same old thing. And since we've done this one on camera, there's really not a lot of point in doing this over and over again, but we'll get to that big one. And this just takes a little finagling. This is why I cut the parts so big oversized. I almost cut it too small here. Not really. Okay, this piece ready to put in the bag. And then the big challenge. The big challenge, trying to get the big piece. Everything's a challenge with this stuff. An attempt to try to make this, that I would learn something from what's turning out to be an okay experience. What's happening is I'm trying to do 2 at once. I really want to do 3 at once. I want to do the 3rd one, but it doesn't look like that's going to work out for me. What happened is I couldn't get the bags to seal, so I called Dave and he said try reinforcing them with the duct tape top and bottom. And I also buried this in epoxy, thinking, some 5-minute epoxy, thinking that would seal it. Now I could get up to about 15 pounds. Now I'm getting over 22 as the epoxy's curing. I'm sure some of it's getting sucked in there. But these are really look like they're holding their own here. And I can see that one of the things, see this is air pockets. It isn't hurting anything, but because I fooled around with the fitting so much, I really got a couple of air bubbles in here. They push right out if you have an escape route that you need to. I need to monitor these earlier on in the layup and not get caught up in having these fittings go bad on me. See, those will ooze right out. Step in my evolution is to figure out exactly the best method that's going to work for me on sealing these bags up. Now I don't know if I'm going to be able to use these bags over and over again, or if I can seal this with some kind of silicone before I use it. Again, Dave has been real helpful, and he'll do the, I'm sure by the end of the day he'll call me back, give me some ideas what to do on this. Seems like the hardest part of this whole job is going to be how to lay out the fabric. I thought this would be a lot easier, but of course everything I did I thought was going to be easier. And I can't get this piece to come all the way to the back, so I'm going to have to make a little bit of a lap joint there, but I don't see that as being a major problem. Okay. Once I make, what I'm going to have to do ultimately here is when I get this right, make some patterns for this. All materials prepped, ready to, we'll give this a try. Going through the same thing where I always tend to get air bubbles in this. I guess they all come out. I'm only concerned with it because if it comes out in a final mold, then it's a problem. So while there's music and things I've learned is on a big mold like this, you got to be real careful not to scratch the PVA with the edge of the brush. In this case, these are cheesy brushes. I really don't want to wind up with a big scratch in the PVA. Even more so because this is a green mold, it's a new mold. As a mold gets older and older, it tends not to be a problem to release, but New molds, especially on the first shot, can really be a challenge.
No kiss, I'm happy that I'm learned to love and to devil may kill.
And with the shop this cold, I really have plenty of extra working time, so I want to get plenty around the edge here, so this will tend to fold over. Well, sooner or later, probably sooner, we're going to know if this mold works. See, the first time through anything like this, like laying it up, I know, in essence, that it's going to be, you know, touch and go the first time through. Maybe cutting the material the wrong size or something. Finding spots where the material doesn't want to lay in a mold just right. The mistake is to think that oh, it's just going to be no problem. Try to anticipate problems that aren't even going to happen. I think it's better in my case anyway. And the cold shop environment gives me that little extra working time, so when I get into a situation where I'm not happy with something, as I'm beating it down, I haven't cut the edges yet. Trying to get it in position so I can put the next layer in there. Now I'll do the back piece next, so I have the layers overlapping, not all in one big notch. Okay, I'd like to get a little overlap here, but not too much. Now, if this works the way I was hoping it might, my stab platform will be molded right in rather than be an extra piece of laminated plywood or wood of some kind that needs a joint. This piece will be molded right in. Again, we are definitely going to find out. As long as I can get each piece to overlap just a little bit, I think I'll be fine. That'll act, in essence, like a little bit of a former up there anyway. What this does, it just lets it conform better. I have to do each layer. Now, all the material is in the mold now. Now I just want to look around for little spots. I might want to reinforce this, like around the tail. The idea is to get this stuck down before I put the bleeder cloth on. And on a big mold like this, it does get messy. I'd like it stuck down at least semi-permanently before I put that bleeder cloth in there. Okay, now obviously what's going to happen is these parts are going to have to sit here. I'm going to let them sit here for the better part of 48 hours. And we have other aspects of the plane to work on while this is all curing away here. And our pump is pumping away. Now, I just wanted to put a quick plug in for this video. This is really a cool video. It's got a lot of computer-generated graphics. It's got Larry Scarinzi, Phil Spillman, and Bob Pitkin, among others, doing the pattern. Some real good tips on cleaning up your pattern by Art Adamus and World Judge. Anyway, this is the video, and I found it to be very entertaining. Some good information, especially the parts from Big Art. Let's get a little plug in here. Image producers, 7131 Akron Canfield Road, Canfield, Ohio, 44406. Phone number 330-533-0100. Anyway, this is, unfortunately, the truth is I got this from Bob Pitkin just before he passed away. And it's one of the little things that's sad is to look up on the screen and see Bob flying and knowing how much he enjoyed the event. We're going to miss him. Some of the things we've learned from the latest, I don't know. The biggest thing we learned was that the fittings that we were using were not sealing up completely airtight, causing the pump never to shut off. And what we did, and this is probably an important lesson, probably somebody that really was a mold maker would laugh and say, gee, you just figured that out. This is, the cure time for this resin system is 24 hours. Well, I left it in a bag 48 hours because the shop temperature here tends to be a little colder than 70 degrees. In fact, I just happen to like working when it's cold rather than hot as a personal thing. And notice I always take apart the small parts first. So in case, and for instance, if I were to pull this part and feel the resin still a little sticky or something, well, you know, this would be a good time to put it back. Even though we're not going to squeeze any more resin out of this, that's for sure. But now, I need to go through the same routine of peeling up the edge here, and I don't know that we're going to get it up nice and clean. And those bigger molds, they're going to comprise, it's going to be a little more sophisticated than this, that's for sure. Okay, here comes the peel ply. Oops, here it is. I know you think I set that up. I didn't, believe me. And boy, that looks like... Now, this is one that's 3 layers of 3-ounce cloth. I was hoping I'm going to get away with using 2 layers of it, but the first part I made, I had trouble with this. But needless to say, this is the way you learn. And this is the way you have to go about anything like this. It's trial and error. If somebody would come along and tell you, oh yeah, use this, well, you can see how I peel this away. Now where the peel ply wasn't sucked right down because of the lip here. Now that's the bottom of the fuselage. Obviously now I've got to come up with, and I got to kind of invent this today because I want to start doing this. I need a real accurate way of trimming the edges on this. I really have to spend some time and figure out exactly how I want to trim the edges. Try to save these bags and use them over if we make another piece real soon. But the reason I wouldn't want to just take this and run another part, I want to see if, and again this is 3 layers, I'm really trying to push this, and I want to see if I can get away with using 2 layers at some point in time. And I don't know from the big pieces, I haven't even pulled them out of the bag yet. But if you've seen that release, wow. What I'm always concerned with, and I guess from the early days of experimenting with molds, is you'd get to this point, and that piece would freeze in there, and you not only threw away the part, the $97, and the mold. Every time you made a mistake, it was $300. Well, looks like we've finally gotten to the point where it's less than $300 anyway. Anyway, hey, if you look in the background, you see these computer-generated things. That is a cool video. I really like that. And that's the kind of thing I'll be playing over and over and over in the shop, especially when some of the new guys in the club are here. Now, let's get the big parts out. I'm just looking this over real carefully now. Needless to say, even though this is very nice that we have a beautiful shiny finish, I did that more for the release than for the final finish, because when I put the primer on this, of course I'm going to want to rough this up and get a rough tooth on that. But in the meantime, it's nice, you know, it has that nice finished look as we're assembling it. Anyway, I want to get the other bigger parts, see if I can get them pulled out of the mold today. Anyway, we're going to pretty much redundantly repeat the same thing we did with the original, the little parts. I just hope these are going to come out just as well. But you never can tell. The beautiful part about molding is always in the beginning of doing it. You have trouble releasing the parts. And then later on, even now, I have a lot of anxiety that it's not going to come out. But I don't know. As time goes by, I'm having less and less anxiety. But the things so far that we've run into that have been a problem. This was Dave Midgley's idea, and it seems to have worked. was to reinforce the bag inside and outside before putting in the fittings. Now I put this 5-minute epoxy on here just as a way of trying to seal it. It didn't work perfectly, but it worked good enough that we have parts. And sometimes that's all you need is a stopgap thing till I can get with Dave and figure out if I was doing something wrong, or he can see in real life. These fittings have a check valve. They're either on or off, and I don't know that they leak at the check valve or what. Again, this is the kind of stuff we're going to try to research, and within the next couple of pulls on these molds, try to get it resolved. One of the things, this piece came right out, by the way. One of the things that Dave had told me, and because I'm new to this, I'm learning the hard way, in pulling this part out, because there's a lot of sharp edges from the epoxy drying, there's a lot of little razor blades, I put a hole in the bag. Now that means I can't use this bag over in the size that it was, but what I can do is make a smaller bag, maybe for putting in landing gear cowling. I had done a couple of, off camera, I have done a couple of vacuum bagging pulls on the post-cured resin on the landing gear, but I'm not getting any major gain over using the normal resin that I've been using, so I haven't really pushed on that too much. Now I want to save the fitting, of course, even though I'm going to have to take all that epoxy off. Maybe I'll just have to soak it in acetone to get that off. I'm not sure yet. Again, now I have a smaller bag and the fitting to use over on the next pull. Now what I'm trying this time is just to peel up the edge with my bare hands, even though these edges are kind of sharp. I'm trying to figure out as many different ways I can of getting these. Oh, here we go. Now there's one defect in this I can see up here, but it's right in the spot where we're going to cut a hole for the air intake anyway. That looks like we have a usable part. Again, we don't know the weight. I can't really tell the weight until it's all trimmed off. And a lot of it, most of the weight comes off because the epoxy is inside in that bleeder cloth. Once you pull that bleeder cloth off, an awful lot of the epoxy comes off. Again, because this is really a lot of razor blades, I'm getting all cut up doing this. So you're probably saying, well, why doesn't this dope use gloves? Well, I may be getting gloves pretty soon for this. Anyway, I just wanted to show this. You can see how much epoxy is actually in that bleeder cloth. It stays in there, and that doesn't stay in the mold. I put some of that felt that George Spar sent to see if that would work as absorbing the extra epoxy. I think that's what it's for, and of course that was one of the things I had to learn the hard way here. But I'm going to do the same thing, hopefully do this real carefully, so maybe I can use this bag over. I only have a few of these bags, and I want to make more parts. Now remember, the other thing with this is these parts are made with a resin system that needs to be post-cured now. So as soon as I get these out, they're going to go in the oven and get the post-curing done before I go to any other further steps. But I'd say so far, from looking at how these are coming out, maybe this isn't the parts that the final addition of this. But these are certainly a lot better than I originally even thought. I thought I'd be running gallons of resin before I got a part to come out that was even half usable. The other thing is I have an idea, even if I use this for a test piece, I have an idea of how I want to install the motor mounts in the crutch, and I need to obviously have a piece that I can use as a prototype. Believe it or not, everybody says, it's been in the shop, oh, just put a radial mount in here. Nah, I want to have a carbon fiber beam with some cross webbing, a tank box. I want a removable. It's a lot more complicated than it looks in the video. Believe me, when you try to figure out all the details, I know it, until you actually do it, you don't realize how many little details and angles and edges and everything there are. It's quite complicated, but we're making progress. The part that I was afraid would be a real problem in the back here looks like it's no problem at all, which is kind of typical. See, I've got the center line cast right into the mold so I can lay out the wing. Well, for what it's worth, we have shells. I'll clean this all up, trim the edges, and we're almost at the end of this. We are at the end of this video. I just looked, we only have about a minute left. But whether this is going to ultimately work for me, I don't know. Now, one of the things I know is I have to clean the mold up of all these sharp edges. Now, there's a lot of little, see how these are? They're like little razor blades. This post-cured resin dries like very, very sharp edges on everything. But anyway, we have what amounts to be the first, this is the first one out of the mold. It's just a question of trimming everything off here, and hey, I'm real proud of that. I'm not disappointed, even though it's taken us 2 molds and a lot of learning. I like to think that I'm a self-taught person anyway. Tail should mount right in there, and that's what you buy with carbon fiber. Anyway, we have no idea what the weight's going to be relative to, and we don't have an idea yet, even though I've had this cast right in. The stab platform, I still need to make that back piece, and we have a whole nother fuselage to work on the next video, so while this is drying in the post-cure oven, we'll work on the other parts. Now, it was only really a few weeks ago when we started these molds, and it looks like, at least I'm optimistic, but then I'm optimistic about everything. I always root for the underdog in a Super Bowl and whatever, but I always, the challenge of modeling is to create new things and to go places where it's not so easy to go. And this is certainly, once these molds are perfected, I hope we'll all be able to go there, and it won't be a big secret how to go there. I hope it'll be something that we can all someday use in some way, even if only parts of this come to fruition.
No goodbye.
So remember, we have the wood fuselage to work on, so what we're going to be doing now is be bouncing back and forth until we have both of them done, and then we can start to compare weights and which is more rigid and things like that.
So warm, so
And I really hope you've gotten some enjoyment out of the video. Please share it with all your friends. And as I end the video, President Nixon calls to congratulate me on a great set of carbon fiber fuselage shells. You believe this? But I'll tell you, the more time goes by, the more I like to look at this plane. I really hope this model is going to be successful. I really do get a... And after seeing that video of the real plane flying, wow.
how I love you.
Boy, how young we all used to be. God. Could it be that we were ever this young? Anyway, hope you enjoyed the tape again, and please share it with your friends.
Of the world in your eyes.
Hey, and what's coming up real soon? Real soon we're going to have to do some canopy work. I want to try to make that removable canopy. I want to try to make a canopy where 2 Allen screws take the whole canopy out and you put it in another plane. Don't know if I'm going to be able to do it, but we're certainly going to give it a try. Don't you get sick of making a canopy for every plane? Don't you wish you could just have one canopy for all the planes? Maybe it'll happen.
The gentle spark.
Hey, and part of this video series is going to be an all Brodak dope finish. That's coming up too. Hope you'll be with us for it.
In your eyes, I see the deepness, the love I feel.
It's just hard to believe we were all young together. And with the passing of Bob Barron and Bob Pitkin, among others, God, it just seems like we're all getting older.
Autumn comes, summer
Just look back and see